All right. Welcome, everyone. I am excited to welcome you to this learning lab, which is part of our Faithful Green Leaders training. This one is entitled Developing Watershed Eyes, Do Unto Those Downstream. And we're going to learn about both the problems and the solutions to water pollution in our watershed and develop our own watershed eyes for understanding issues. So without going too much further, I want to introduce my colleague, Anna Wimbo, who is the Director of Leadership Development with Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. I am the religious educator, and I'm delighted to have you join us.
Yeah, so thanks, Golia. Just a couple of points, welcome everyone to this learning lab, which, as you might already know, serves as a supplement to our Faithful Green Leaders training. If you've been to our website lately, you probably noticed that we've already scheduled the next 3 trainings starting next year. So I encourage you, if you have not yet attended any of those core trainings, take a look and see if one of those dates works for you for the upcoming core Faithful Green Leaders training. And I'm really excited to see how many people we have who are really interested in environmental stewardship. So let's jump in. Back to you, Kolia.
So we're just going to do a very brief orientation here and make sure that everybody's on the same page. We're going to we've just reviewed before, but some of you may have just joined us. If you can rename yourself, and this is how to do that, to add your congregation name after your own name. And that's hovering over your picture, clicking on the 3 little dots in the upper right corner. They'll drop down and you'll see rename, and that's how you can add your congregation name after your own name. Some just basic navigating functions along your bottom of your screen. You'll hover, this toolbar will pop up, and on the far left is your mute mic. That is to turn your mic off. And we do suggest you keep it off during the entire webinar until we get to the questions and answers, which will be after our presenters. That'll be about after the half hour of this webinar. And also, if you're moving around and there's something going on, or you just need to stand up and get some exercise, please do stop your video so there's not a lot of movement and distraction. If you want to put any kind of questions into the chat, that's we won't be using participants function, but number 4, you click on chat and you can type in your own question or comment. So that's the basic navigation. Then we have 2 views. Anna spoke earlier about this. You're looking at speaker view, but if you'd like to see everyone's happy faces, you can choose gallery view by clicking on that button in the upper right corner. So this is what gallery view looks like with just 3 people. So just a quick review, mute yourself while the speakers are presenting, and turn your webcam off if you need to move around. I'm delighted to start first of all with an opening prayer, and this one is about water. So if you'll join me for a moment of prayer. Every day, every passing second, your grace, like water, is on the move, bringing new life and blessing your creation. Immersed in your spirit, may we move within the cycle of your love, giving life like water to any who thirst. Amen, and so be it in all of our work to restore God's creation. So I'm excited to introduce Darcy Herman, who is the Associate Program Manager with the Gunpowder Valley Conservancy. And she will be sharing with us some basic understandings of stormwater pollution. We call this watershed literacy, or developing watershed eyes, because what we're hoping you'll gain from this is understanding how to communicate this message to others and motivate them to take action like you already are. So thank you, Darcy, for joining us, and take it away.
All right. Thank you, Kolia. So I want to give everyone my 10-minute objective, my objective for the 10 minutes that I have here. I hope that my presentation will give you some metaphors that are good for teaching others about the stormwater problem, a few talking points that I like to use in presentations, and then I want to wrap up with an overall mantra that I think is useful for talking about stormwater solutions. So first off, what is a watershed? The title of the program tonight is Developing Watershed Eyes. Watershed's a very basic concept, a word that we use a lot to talk about stormwater pollution, but not many people know what it means. But it is simply an area of land that all drains to the same body of water. Next slide. So the most useful metaphor that I've ever found for talking about a watershed is a bathtub. The edges of the watershed are the edges of the tub. Everything in the tub is inside the watershed, and it all flows out down the drain, which is the body of water that the watershed is named for. Next slide. So often people can get overwhelmed thinking about how big the Chesapeake Bay watershed is, and they have a hard time making a personal connection to it. But watersheds are actually nested within each other and interconnected. In my neck of the woods up in northeastern Baltimore County, a little stream that runs behind someone's house in Parkville has its own watershed. Many of these little streams in the area drain to the lower Gunpowder Falls in Baltimore County, which drains to the Gunpowder River, and then finally into the Chesapeake Bay. Next slide.
Sorry.
There we go. So that's the concept of a watershed, but where does that stormwater problem come in? Well, stormwater problems happen with increased development. And when we say development, we mean replacing forested and other types of vegetated areas with impervious or hard surfaces. So what does this mean? Next slide. Well, that brings me to my second metaphor. Development changes a surface that used to act like a sponge to one that acts more like a brick, and often is a brick, in fact. Trees absorb and hold stormwater, while hard impervious surfaces shed stormwater. So you're going from a sponge to a brick. Next slide. How many people have seen this type of situation in their neighborhood? I bet quite a few of them. Many people experience this problem with development and impervious surface on a very personal level in their own backyards. The more hard surfaces you have in your neighborhood, the more stormwater volume flows over the land without being absorbed. Next slide. And as the stormwater flows over and runs off of impervious surfaces, or those hard surfaces, it carries with it the pollution and the debris on the surface. This water flows into storm drains, and it picks up speed and volume along the way, finds its way to our streams and larger waterways without being filtered. That's a really important point and a common misconception. Stormwater is not filtered like our sewer water is. Next slide. Which brings me to my third metaphor. Waters that would normally flow slowly and evenly or trickle steadily with some kind of predictable flow, with some of the water being absorbed by trees and other vegetation, now with development flow more like a fire hose or this power washer that we see here. And if you think about what you use a power washer for, and what kind of force that has, you can really damage a surface by using a power washer that's too powerful for that surface. And I'll return to that metaphor in a little bit, but next slide. I now want to give you a couple talking points, being the top two contributors to stormwater pollution. And the first one is excess nutrients, which is kind of a strange word to use to describe something bad. I know, it's not like vitamins that we take into our bodies. I'm talking about when we over-fertilize our lawns, when excess fertilizer falls on a sidewalk or other hard surface, when sewage leaks happen, or when pet waste is carried into a storm drain. Excess phosphorus and nitrogen are carried to our waterways, and plants love phosphorus and nitrogen. This type of fertilizer causes algae that it's normally present in kind of balanced quantities in our waterways to bloom very explosively. Eventually, this algae dies off and the decomposition in the water that happens with bacteria depletes the water of oxygen that aquatic animals need to live, and we get what's called dead zones. Next slide. One of the most important things to convey, I think, to people, to your congregations and constituents, is that much of the nitrogen and phosphorus that pollutes our waterways is from lawns. So everyone with a lawn can control how it's managed and reduce or eliminate fertilizer, which I think has great potential. Next slide. So the second largest contributor to stormwater pollution is sediment, or just loose dirt. If we come back to that fire hose or power washer metaphor I mentioned a couple slides earlier, especially with climate change, these torrential downpours are really becoming more of the new normal in weather rather than a gentle storm. When you concentrate more water in a small place, in a small segment of time, the force of this water as it's rushing through our streams dislodges soil and erodes these stream banks. The loose dirt is carried downstream, and it makes waterways more shallow, which reduces the amount of habitat that's available to aquatic organisms. And it also makes the water cloudy, which reduces the amount of light that can reach underwater grasses and other types of plants that these aquatic organisms depend on for food and habitat. Next slide. So that means that a waterway that might once have had a smooth, gently sloping floodplain, like the photo on the left, now after that fire hose effect has those steep eroded banks like the photo on the right. So even when a smooth flow of water comes through, the water can't reach that floodplain like it used to, and it's kind of destined into that channel there. Next photo. So I also find that people often want to know, just tell me how bad things are. Is anything that's being done helping with this stormwater program or problem? And I like to use the Chesapeake Bay report card as kind of a snapshot of this. The report card's produced by a consortium of many different organizations that monitor different health indicators in the Bay. Well, the report card gave the region a C- score in 2019, which is 44 points out of a possible 100. So although Bay health declined slightly overall from 2018, the news was not all bad. And I think this is important to convey to people. 10 out of the 15 reporting regions in the report card had better scores than 2018. And with climate change, restoration efforts to control nutrient and sediment pollution are only going to become more important. So we have to keep doing what we've already started. Next slide. So what can be done? What's our stormwater goal? Next slide. So I'm going to wrap up with that mantra that I mentioned that I would give you. What we need to do with stormwater is slow it down, spread it out instead of concentrating it into channels, and to the greatest extent possible, allow it to soak in where it falls rather than pushing it away. And like COVID-19, we need to flatten the stormwater curve. There are a lot of similarities in that sort of metaphor, that mathematical relationship. We use best management practices that can help achieve that slow, steady, constant flow of water rather than these large, overwhelming dumps of water that overstrain our infrastructure and degrade the health of our waterways. Next slide. So 3 of the practices that I advocate for at the Gunpowder Valley Conservancy and that we often implement through our Clear Creeks project are rain barrels, rain gardens, and tree plantings. And all 3 of these practices help to slow down the flow of the stormwater, spread it out, and allow it to soak into the ground instead of washing away. And I will end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Darcy. Beautiful. And we will be certainly looking forward to questions that our participants may have of you after we hear from Shane Robertson. Shane, are you on the line?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hey, wonderful. Yes, great. Well, Shane Robinson is the executive director of not the Gunpowder Valley Conservancy. My apologies. I was editing these. And you are for, the executive director of Trash Free Maryland, as you see the logo there. And I'm very glad that you're willing to share with us some of the issues of plastic contributions to the pollution in our waterways and the solutions that we can participate in.
Yeah, well, thank you, Colia. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for everybody who's taken the time to come out tonight. And thank you, Darcy, for an excellent presentation on stormwater, which is linked to plastic pollution and microplastics as well, because it's a great driver, right? Stormwater is a great vehicle for the stormwater or the plastics to ride down into other parts of our watershed. It also brought back bad memories of when I was on the House Environment Matters Committee when I was a delegate trying to pass a stormwater fee and just really struggling to solve this issue on a statewide level, and then having it rebranded as a rain tax, if you remember, when really we were just trying to solve a huge problem for a state that has about 3,100 miles of shoreline. So stormwater is really big here. That was a great presentation, kind of a primer. Trash Free Maryland is, and you can go to the next slide, please. We're a 501c3 focused on reducing litter and trash in the state, as is in our name. We focus on a couple things. The main one is trying to curb trash at its source, right? So it's more of a policy perspective. We focus on policy and regulation first, and then afterwards we work on other ways to mitigate trash and litter pollution, and most of that is through collaboration and coordination with other people and groups to do trash pickups, to work on things that are very hard like behavior change, etc. So I'll talk a little bit about those. The next slide, please. Just a few things on plastic. So I'm seeing a typo here. This is my fault. It says 300 million pounds of plastic are produced each year. Actually, it's 300 million metric tons, and it's quite a bit higher than that. In 2014, it was 311 million metric tons, which was up from about 1 million metric tons in 1950. I believe we hit 2 million in 1989, hit no, it was far less. I think we hit 1 million in 1950. 1.5 million in 1950, 100 million metric tons in 89, 200 million in 2002, and then we're well over 300 million. So I was off by about 3 decimal points there, almost. But it keeps growing. And with COVID-19, there's even more. I mean, there's the obvious plastic pollution with PPE creation. Everybody sees the masks that we're all wearing, gloves that we're using for our safety. But a lot of it that we're seeing now is actually from curbside pickup of ordering food. So people are ordering delivery right now, or they're picking it up, and it's coming with a lot of single-use plastics that are ending up in our waste stream, and they're being produced now in higher quantities. And this goes along with a drop in the cost of the barrel of oil this year. When the price on oil collapsed, the oil and gas industry's profits shifted from oil to plastic production. So we continue to see more and more plastic production each year. Only about 9% of it, since the beginning, only about 9% of it is thought to have been recycled. The rest is landfilled, incinerated, or it ends up in the watershed, sometimes aided by stormwater. So that's a little on, yeah, we can go ahead to the next one. That's fine. And then the one after it. This is just the graph. This right here just shows that in North America, we're responsible, along with Western Europe, for the bulk of the production and use of single-use plastics, and then we try to recycle it poorly, often, because much of it is not recyclable. We try to send it overseas to developing nations that then end up facing an even greater trash problem. And there's a whole, we don't have time to talk about the inequities of trash and litter, but there's a huge component with that, and then just the negative structural aspects of our society. So then plastic, of course, breaks down. There's a lot of, there are large chunks of plastic in the ocean. It's thought about 8 million metric tons of plastic land in the ocean each year now. And actually, I think it might have been on another slide, by 2050, it's expected that there will be more plastic by weight in the ocean than there is fish, which is very troubling. But anyway, a lot of the plastics degrade down into microplastics that gets into all manner of things. In fact, again, not a lot of time to talk about this, but microplastic is not something that you want in your body. Well, it's in all of our bodies now. I mean, it's in water that we drink. We found it's in beer. it's all over the place. And a lot of that is because we've not been able to keep it in the waste stream, and it's hard to keep it in the waste stream when there's just so much of it. We have tried in the assembly to do some things. In 2015, we got rid of microbeads, if you remember those. But there's just still so much. There's more and more data coming out about the amount of plastic and trash in the bay. This is something that was done by my predecessor a few years ago. It was a study on trash in the bay. So there are about 30 points or so that they went and checked, basically, checked the amount of litter and trash in those areas. On the next slide, you'll see some of the standouts or in areas that you would expect where there are more people and more stormwater problems, such as I believe 27 and 28 are the Patapsco and the Back River near Baltimore. And the other ones too are the large outflows from the large urban districts where, you know, stormwater hits parking lots. Parking lots have plastic on them, and it ends up in the bay. All right. So one thing we've been trying to do, if any of you are part of a Baltimore City congregation, or even if you're not, you've probably seen Mr. Trash Wheel and the other trash wheels. That's something that we have to do. I mean, it's something we need to do to mitigate the outflow of all types of trash, not only single-use plastics and plastics in general, but it's expensive. It's expensive to do that. Each one of those units costs about $400,000. It's about $50,000 a year to maintain them. What we're hoping to do, again, is just curb it at the source. So a lot of what you see in this picture doesn't end up there in the first place. There are a lot of beverage containers in there. Well, one thing later I'll recommend that you do is try to lean on the decision makers and elected officials in your area to pass a beverage container deposit fee, for example. So those are collected and they don't end up in the waste stream. Any manner of single-use plastics are probably in there. Stirring straws, or stirrers and straws themselves. Expanded polystyrene, also known as styrofoam, which is now banned in the state, at least for food usage. That'll go into effect in October, the final version. And again, I don't know if I mentioned it before, but half of all the plastic that's produced each year, over 300 million metric tons, is single-use plastic that's destined to be used one time, and then it's marked as being recycled, or that can be recycled. But one thing I'd like everybody to take away is there's a big difference between something that can be recycled from an engineering perspective and that actually is recycled and that there's a market for. If you're putting plastic in those blue bins, if you have blue bins in your area, they might be yellow bins or any color. You'll see the numbers on the back. Well, those numbers on the back were invented by industry to show you that, yes, these are recyclable, but that doesn't mean that your jurisdiction can actually recycle them. And even if they could, if there's a market for that, and if it's going to be cost effective. One example is, everybody knows what a solo cup is, right? So anybody who's been to college has probably seen these things. That's a type 1, or it's a type 6 plastic. It's virtually indistinguishable from a type 1. And you can hold 2 cups together, a type 6 and a type 1, or a clamshell that's a type 6 or a type 1. They look the same. One of them, the type 1, county like Montgomery County can get about $200 a ton for those. If they're recycled, there's actually a market, and they can sell them and make some money to subsidize the solid waste component of of county government. The type 6 is not recyclable. And all it does is pollute the rest of the recycling stream. So most counties don't accept it, but people don't know because there's a little recycling thing on the back. So it goes into the bin, and then it ends up basically taking time and energy to clean those things out when they get to the recycling center, which aren't recycling centers. They're actually sorting centers where items are sorted and then sold on the market so that the county can hopefully subsidize the operation. But so you can go to the next slide, please. And please stop me, Coley. I don't want to go over time here. I get excited about this topic, and there was a big work group discussion earlier in the day, and so there are a lot of things floating around in my head. Yes, on this, something I wanted to mention about waste and eliminating plastic and marine debris in general. Costs money to try to eliminate it, but it also saves a lot of money. I can get you the full report, but this is a snapshot of something done by NOAA showing the economic impact of cleaner beaches. And one of the areas they highlighted was coastal Delaware and Maryland. So in general, if the beaches are cleaner, as you would expect, you expect more visitors, which equates to more tourist spending, and then therefore more jobs in the community. The inverse is true as well.
That's great.
Yeah. And how much time am I running out of time?
Just about 2 more minutes here. We
Okay.
got a little bit of a later start, so yeah, if we can begin to wrap it up. I'm turning to the next few slides.
Okay. Well, why don't we go to the next one, and
Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
get to kind of the brass tacks here.
Right.
This really quickly, the health impact pyramid. What I want to point out here is that the behavior change is at the top. That's counseling and education. That's the smallest part. The bottom, socioeconomic factors, are things that we can't necessarily control as groups, as nonprofits, or as part of a congregation. Things in the middle we can. The changing the context, that's a programmatic change, and then the long-lasting protection and interventions can come through policy change. So those are the things I wanted to focus on. Go to the next slide, and I think it's just going to pop up and say what I just said.
Yep. There we go.
And then, so moving beyond cleanups, we can go to the next one, please.
Okay.
So one thing that's important that is the bag ban, the plastic bag ban, almost passed in 2020 in the General Assembly. It's up, and it failed because the pandemic shut down the assembly early, and the bill had passed the House and went to the Senate, and it was on the Senate floor when session ended. We had the votes, we think, veto-proof majorities to pass what would be a ban on plastic bags at the point of sale. So you would not be able to use plastic bags anymore. You'd have to use reusables or an alternative. And we're hoping that passes because that's an obvious target for us to get out of the waste stream. I mean, those are things that all of you have seen in trees and parks, neighborhoods, and in the watershed. So next slide, please. Are they working? Yes, they are. I mean, the first jurisdiction to do anything was DC, and when DC put in their fee, and it was just a fee years ago, they immediately saw a decrease in plastic bags in the Anacostia Rivershed. And we've seen very similar things happen in other jurisdictions around the state and then around the country. So that's about it. Sorry for the rush at the end.
Thank you, Shane. We're going to have Q&A in just a moment. We're going to have 2 congregation representatives talk about their experience with caring for the watershed in different ways. And one of them is about picking up trash. You mentioned, finding plastic bags and all kinds of single-use plastic in the watershed, and getting it at the source so it doesn't get into the watershed is one thing that needs to happen in terms of diminishing that amount. And the other thing is actually clearing out what's there. So thank you, Shane. Well, stick around and we'll have some questions for you in a few moments. Oh, you got resources here. So folks, we'll have recordings of this posted on the Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake website Learning Lab page, and we'll be sending that out to everyone after this Learning Lab is over. So next, I'm delighted to introduce Salman Sheikh, who is a Green Team leader at the Islamic Society of Baltimore. And he has a green team going there and has it even prominently posted on his website, which I was excited to discover. So Salman has a regular commitment based on their congregation's decision to adopt a road program. So are you there, Salman?
Yes, I am.
Would you share with us now how you got your Adopt a Road program started and about your trash pickup program?
So the Adopted Road program actually started probably before I moved to the community. I moved here in 2016, and I was made aware of it probably right soon after I joined the community. And so the reason is we just thought we could help community, clean up, because we've seen a lot of trash along Rolling Road and Johnny Cake Road and Dillon Heights, which are the three roads that kind of surround our mosque and then go up to the main roads. So we just thought we would, clean up the road. We didn't like, it's eyesore to see those things. And then as we started doing it, we found that a lot of stuff was getting into the stream. You mentioned earlier today to me that we're between two streams. I didn't know that, or two creeks. I just seen one, the one that passes between our property. And we saw a lot of trash in that. And so we just started doing this green team thing. And the Adopt a Road program is like 4 times a year, but we try to do it every month. We haven't done it since June, but we're going to plan to do it this month as well. But the county asked us to do it 4 times a year, but we're trying to do it monthly, on a monthly basis. And so we get so one of the questions she asked was, Kolia asked was about engagement. So in the beginning, we got a lot of people, like 30 or 40 people. Now it's like a handful of people. So that's one of the tough things is people get all gung-ho in the beginning, and then things, after they've done it a few times, things tend to peter out sometimes. So that's one of the things we have tough time with, getting people. I think maybe we need, we have community hours for the youth, because youth are a great resource because, they have a lot more energy than us who are getting older and so forth. So we pick up at least 3 to 5 bags of trash. Yeah, that's some of the stuff we have stuck in the fence. That's a little harder for us to clean up. We're probably gonna have to get that professionally done. We contacted the county, and they said since it's on our property, it's basically mud run through from the stream, and then it's getting caught in the fence area, and it doesn't look like something our regular volunteers can do. But we pick up what we can, around the stream, what we can reach. We get, so there's one of our volunteers there, and we put in bags, and then we put in our own dumpsters. County has, they said if we put it next to the sign, they'll pick it up, but we found a couple times they were a little slow in it, and some neighbors got mad, so we just thought we'll just put it in our own dumpster. We pay for that and have it thrown away, and we try to separate it into, recyclables and trash. So, and the amazing thing is there's tons and tons of bottles. And so that's, it's like, I tell my wife not to buy water bottles. Sometimes we do, but I was just like, I hate it because I see how many billions and billions. And as the second speaker mentioned, how much plastic, and you read the numbers and you see these pictures of piles and piles of bottles. And it's just, it's horrible. So, and one of the last things I was going to say is, in our religion, we were told, God told us in the Quran that we're the vicegerents of God on earth, and we have to preserve the resources. So there's one example where the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that, even if a stream of water is running full blast and you have to wash yourself for the prayer, you still should use the minimum amount. You shouldn't be because there was one man who was using a lot, and he told him, don't be excessive, use the minimal amount. So we should conserve our resources as much as we can, and not destroy them. So.
Well, thank you so much, Salman. I really appreciate you sharing this example of what other congregations can do. Even during COVID time, people can engage in trash pickup and can do it in groups, socially distanced. And so it's a really great activity for congregations to contribute to the health of their local watersheds. Well, without any further ado, I'm going to move on to our next presenter from Congregation Mount Moriah AME Church, and that is Phil Colbert. You'll see there, he is a watershed steward in Anne Arundel County, along with watershed steward Betty Powell, who was part of the Riverwise Congregations class. And they have both been installing and contributing great projects to their congregation grounds, and recently engaged in a great maintenance project. So I'll run through the slides, and Phil, you want to take it away?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Collier, for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So I actually became a watershed steward to actually do my part to promote clean waterways and clean watersheds in the area here. There weren't whole lot of folks that look like me that were actually participating in cleaning up the watershed. So I thought it'd be a great idea for me to do so and kind of engage my congregation and the community at large. I use scripture to kind of motivate the congregation. If you look in the book of Genesis in the Bible, I believe it's Genesis 1:28, God gives us dominion or charge over the earth. And so I remind everyone that with that, we have a responsibility to actually take care of and to nurture the earth and the animals and so forth. And also, here in Maryland, particularly here in Annapolis, we like seafood, and so, you want crabs, you want fish, we got to keep the waterways clean. So you look at the photographs there, you have, I go from left to right. That was from my maintenance planting infill project last year. So the original rain garden, which you see there, was actually installed back in 2016. That was a project done in part with Ms. Betty Powell and also Ms. Lonnie Moyer. She's the owner of Garden Girls Landscaping. She was also instrumental in that project. That particular rain garden is about 1,500 square feet. There are actually three installations along the property there, but that is the primary one and the one which draws much of the attention there. And of course, it's great because it's located on a busy thoroughfare. So in the summertime, it draws a lot of attention. Sometimes folks just simply drive into the parking lot, which we welcome, to kind of look at the flowers and all. In the middle there, you see a plaque, Community Gardens. I want to really mention them because they provided a grant to us last year for the planting. We planted a total of 252 plants. And then additional 25. We didn't do it all at once. We actually split it up. So that photo you see there, that was from our maintenance project, from our cleanup back in August. So we did a weeding and it was, I tell you, intimidating. Fortunately, we had the help from the maintenance corps, headed up by Miss Amy Clements and Ann Jackson. And I tell you, that crew, they actually made it so much easier for us. And they were a huge, huge help. They actually made it bearable to do because I tell you, I was actually intimidated when we first got out there because the weeds just kind of had taken over. But hopefully, we'll get around to planting even more plants. And so to kind of ward off the growth from the weeds. Another thing I want to mention also is that the parking lot there is actually a slope. And there's another slope in a wooded area. The property is owned by the church. And it's probably at least an acre in size. So you have a large wooded area, you have a lot of leaf litter and so forth. So the 3 projects or installations there that we have are great in capturing the runoff from the wooded area and especially the sediment and all the nutrients from the leaves and so forth. And hopefully kind of catch it. Of course, we can't catch all of it, but to kind of catch most of that water and filter it before it goes down into the drain and into the waterway. As Dr. Johnson there, he's a member of the congregation. He's also, he's not a steward. I call him kind of like a quasi or parish steward because he knows all of the lingo. He knows more than I know. But he's actually, I didn't hear you.
Oh, go ahead. Keep going.
Oh, I'm sorry. But he's also been instrumental in maintaining the rain gardens as well. So, I don't want to take up any more time.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Phil. I think we'll close there. And if you have more to say during our Q&A, I just thought this looked like how it really shows a good picture of what it looked after you get it cleared out, and you can really see those pollinator plants, and everything's really going to be doing its work for the rain garden, as you mentioned, capturing all that stormwater runoff and filtering it, as Darcy said earlier. So without any further ado now, I'm going to open up time for questions from everyone about anything related to the watershed, issues in your area, projects that you wanted to do to address stormwater, some problems you may be having with accumulated stormwater, especially with these heavy rains. So you go ahead and unmute yourself, and we will take questions one at a time. And if you have anything in the chat that you want to actually ask a question in the chat, that's a great thing to do too. I do see, let's see, there's some chat. Oops, I'm looking.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Mr. Brian Borley, one more, one less mentoring. Currently, we are in Curtis Bay trying to teach kids urban farming, rain barrels, stormwater pollution, and also clean up the beach area at the boathouse in Cherry Hill. Looking just to partner with a lot of organizations that can give us resources, give us hands-on explanation of how to make effectiveness with these youth that are trying to learn how to become stewards. Thank you.
Well, that's wonderful. I think there's a lot of interest in partnerships, and I know that during our Faithful Green Team trainings, we've had congregations that have joined together in planning events and doing projects. So I think there's ways through this network that we're developing through the One Water Partnership that we can certainly connect you with other congregations. And working with the youth and cultivating this kind of understanding and commitment is a wonderful thing, a wonderful ministry.
Chloe, if I can jump in, this is
Yes.
Bonnie. I work for Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, and I cover the Baltimore area. I would love to connect with you. We did a tree planting with Blue Water Baltimore, who's our technical partner in Baltimore City. We did a tree planting in Cherry Hill, an interfaith tree planting. We had folks from all different congregations showed up and planted those trees. But trees, after they get planted, they still need love and care. So I'm sure that there's a way to engage your youth there. But we should talk and come up with some ways to connect you with some of our partners in Baltimore. Thank you for joining tonight.
Any other questions, comments?
I have a question about the rainfall, and I'm not sure which one of your speakers can answer that, but I put it in chat. When I was looking, in a 365-day span, we had 73 inches, and our normal is like 43. So is this becoming a new normal? I just wondered, because it's, I didn't expect to be living in Seattle after, well, or, you know, Olympic Peninsula. Anyway, I just think that's the reason why our project at our church that we put in for a design grant went from a pretty small little rain garden for a couple of downspots for the sanctuary to the whole complex and 755 square feet, 2 major bio rain garden retention, because Abby Hunsiger told us from Alliance for the Bay that that little rain garden was no longer appropriate, that we needed to look at the big picture. And by the way, we're at the top of the watershed. We have nobody else giving us rain, just the cemetery. So everything we can do is great, but we don't have to deal with other people's stormwater coming. And yet, you know, sumps are going in our basement. It's a 200-year-old sanctuary. So we have put in for the grant, hopefully. But the point is, I just wondered, what's up with the rain?
Yeah,
That was something, deluge rains. Is that new normal?
Thank you, Fawn. Darcy, would you like to comment on that?
I can't, I'm not an authority on the weather, but I feel like it really is becoming the new normal, Fawn. And we're finding that we have been designing rain gardens to capture the first inch of runoff,
Yes.
which is typical for environmental site design for a long time in Maryland. That may not be enough going into the future. And we're finding that we're putting in more microbial-retention practices to treat larger areas. So I would say the bigger, the better for the future. And those 100-year floods are becoming 50 and 25-year floods, I feel like.
Thank you.
If someone else doesn't have a question, I have a question for Shane. So I live in Howard County, and we were really excited that we did get our plastic bag ban passed for the county. That got through last year. And then when COVID hit, when I go shopping in Howard County, now stores won't let me bring my reusable bags in. They're, you know, you're basically having to use their bags because they don't want folks, you know, they just don't want stuff touching. And I'm just wondering, you know, do you foresee that to be a setback to us trying to get this passed? Like, did we somehow miss that sweet spot window to get this done? Are we now going to get pushed back to get this passed the next legislative session? What do you think?
Oh, yeah, great question. And it was great that Howard County led the way on that. There were initial setbacks with, I think, particularly in March and April, when little was known about the transmission of the virus on surfaces. There was more concern then, and there was some not necessarily accurate, or I would say inaccurate information out there that plastic bags were better than reusable bags in terms of not transmitting COVID-19. We know now that's not the case, but you know, individual retailers are making decisions as well, and you'll see some retailers will not allow reusables in their stores. Others will, but you have to bag the groceries yourself. And you can always, it depends. If you're lucky enough to drive a car to a grocery store, then you can just wheel your groceries out and bag it at your car as a last ditch effort. But I think this is something that is going to turn around. Washington State still passed their bag ban despite the pandemic. New York is moving ahead with theirs. Cincinnati, I believe, looks like they're on the verge of doing a plastic bag ban. Recently, Montgomery County, well, it was during the summertime, but they were talking about putting a pause on the 5-cent fee that they have for plastic bags during the pandemic. They ended up not doing that. So I think kind of the science is starting to outperform it's not hysteria. I don't want to call it that. There's great reasons to be concerned, but there was concern about reusable bags that wasn't backed by factual information. So that's kind of going away. It is going to be a harder session to pass anything in because, I mean, with people losing their homes, with people losing their jobs, people dying, people with family members that have passed away or are very ill, a lot of that is going to be the priority. So is the state income, how the state's doing. So it could be a little harder this year. The nice thing is that we have a bill that pretty much passed. So without changes, we should be able to get it through early. But if we don't do it this year, the following year is an election year. So this kind of is our year for this 4-year legislative term to pass it.
Shane, there's another question here about the pyramid that you shared with us earlier. Can you say something about the social justice component of trash in the watershed?
Well, sure. And I mean, this is a huge topic. It's one that the United States is finally, hopefully, coming to terms with, our history here and privilege and how it affects the environment. And it can be looked at as a Venn diagram. In this case, we know that your ethnicity and the color of your skin affects how much you're affected by trash pollution in the country. And it's worse for African Americans, Latinos by a large margin than average. And then for whites, it's generally, I think it's like 17% better than the average. And a lot of that is where people live. And that goes to the roots of the way we established this country and the way it still operates hundreds of years later. So that's a hard thing for a little nonprofit or a little group to change necessarily, but we can be part of that. We can be part of that solution. A lot of groups are talking about this right now, particularly in the environmental community, which has been accused, and rightly so, of parachuting in when there are environmental problems and basically trying to tell people what they needed to do to solve their issues. I think people are realizing that doesn't work, and people are looking for solutions from a much broader and holistic perspective. But it's hard to really give solutions on something like that right now in the time constraints that we have. But it's the nice thing I would say is the environmental community is now finally thinking differently and realizing that just fixing an ecological problem isn't separate from the social problems and inequities that exist in our society, that they go hand in hand, they affect each other, and you have to solve it holistically or you're never going to have a sustainable fix. So I probably didn't answer your question, but it's where we are.
We have another question. Thank you, Shane. I appreciate that. Someone would like to ask, this is Rachel, would like to ask Darcy about citizen or community science initiatives in regards to reducing nutrient pollution.
Yeah, great question. At the Gunpowder Valley Conservancy, we are hoping to get into more of a water monitoring program right now, and that is chemical and macroinvertebrate monitoring of our waterways. Right now we have an Adopt a Stream program where people can adopt a quarter-mile stream segment and keep track of the physical changes, which are important to monitoring the health of the waterways, and do that sort of thing there too. But there are other organizations in the area that are probably better equipped to get that citizen science component going than the Gunpowder Valley Conservancy, but that's definitely on the horizon for us.
This is Bonnie. Rachel, that really depends on where you're located. So if you want to contact us, and we can try to figure out where your region is and then put you in touch, because different watershed groups do actual monitoring and use, so if it's something that you're trying to do like congregationally or with a youth group or something like that, depending upon where you are, there might be a group that we can connect you with.
Well, it's more, I work for the Department of Natural Resources, and I know that we've been doing a lot with, especially during the winter, the de-icing salt. This is another common pollutant that we see in our watershed, and it's really ecologically harmful. And so we've been doing this community or citizen science, like it's more accurately called community science for a lot of reasons, but we've we send out these little packets where people can kind of measure the salinity in their own streams in their own neighborhoods, and it gives us a feel for, you know, how much of the salt is being washed off during, you know, the winter and such. And that tells us where we need to focus our efforts on encouraging people to use these less harmful solutions. So I'm just wondering, you know, if anybody out there is doing stuff for the nutrient pollution ones to try and push people to use better stuff on their lawns if they really feel they have to use something on their lawns at all.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm aware, my department's not doing anything like that. So I was wondering if anyone else is.
And which department, which county?
I work for the Maryland Department of Natural Resources.
Oh, okay, the whole state.
So,
Yeah.
State
Yeah.
level. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we certainly do promote organic ways of treating your lawns, and through all the educational materials we do. There's a program we're participating right now called Sacred Grounds with National Wildlife Federation, where they also promote very, you know, organic and natural means of lawn care, and ultimately replacing much lawn with
Yes.
native plants rather than lawn.
Yeah,
So we're also in the lawn conversion business.
Yeah, definitely down for that.
Yeah, exactly. We do.
Rachel, if I could just say, so
Sure.
we have on the salt, I mean, that is something that congregations can definitely affect change at their properties, because a lot of congregations have large parking lots and they're clearing their parking lots and working with contractors or volunteers. So if there's material that DNR has that we can distribute to congregations, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
So, and if there's not something you have, then maybe we need to develop that. I know EPA puts out a whole guide about congregational work, you know, congregations and stormwater. I don't even know if that's even included in there, but it definitely should be. Like, so there's definitely work we can all do to do better on that. And then our whole model is to teach people at congregations, and then they bring that message home. So it definitely can help affect change congregationally and individually as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I will see what I can dig up on our materials that I can maybe share, send email to someone here and see what we can do for that.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
We have another question in the chat from Jacqueline Griswold, who says, where can we find suggestions on planting a rain garden, specifically the kinds of plants which work best? Well, for one thing, I will say a rain garden is really an engineering project, and it requires a whole design that Darcy referred to earlier. And I'll turn it over to Darcy. I have some suggestions about both the plants and rain garden projects. Darcy? Is Darcy still there?
Mm-hmm. She's on mute. There you go.
Let's see if I can unmute her. Where'd she go? Well, I will say,
Rose,
Go ahead.
and then she got booted out.
yeah, I don't see her right now. I will say that we have access to a guide of native plants that we can share with you. That's from the National Fish and Wildlife Federation, I think, but it's a wonderful guide to native plants in Maryland. Planting a pollinator garden is a much less complicated process and less expensive, but both of these, and Bonnie can talk about this too, but both of these are projects that can help mitigate the stormwater. Its rain garden is really a deep dive into creating a space where that rainwater will be captured more effectively, and that requires more front-end design and fundraising to support the project.
Yeah, and Jackie, I don't see in your registration where you're located. Again, that would be depending on where you're located. If you really want a rain garden, we can connect you with a technical partner to help you to plan and design one, and then look for funds to install one. So just email one of us, and we'll try to connect you with our local technical partner that could help you discern what the best avenue to do that is.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Well, I know we're at the top of the hour here. Is there one more burning question that anyone has before
Well, yeah, I
we?
do have one remark.
Yes, Phil.
Yeah, 1 second. So maintenance. I can't stress that enough. That is a huge part of the rain garden. It's great to plant those beautiful plants and flowers, but you have to maintain it. And so I'm not an expert in identifying weeds and plants and things like that. But back in August when we did the weeding, I have to mention that Josh Clark, Noel Child, and Susan Eakin, I mean, they gave a lot of time, knowledge, and also a whole lot of mulch. Josh is a plant expert, and he came out and identified all of the weeds, because some of the weeds actually look like plants. He identified all the weeds that need to be pulled. I photographed them, and then on the day of the actual weeding, I showed up about an hour early, and I tied a piece of twine around all the weeds so that no one would mistakenly pull, the plants. So,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to mention that point.
That's excellent. And I want to make sure that folks know we are going to have a learning lab about maintenance in November. So we look forward to that, and look at our website on Learning Labs, and you could sign up for that learning lab as well. I also wanted to say the folks that Phil is referring to are with the Watershed Stewards Academy of Anne Arundel. And in your area, if you're not in Anne Arundel, you can also gain great technical assistance for identifying native plants from master gardeners, which is part of the Maryland University Extension. So that's another resource I recommend for plant identification. Anything else we should add now? Let's jump to the last slide for our information to promote our programs. Anna?
1 second, I just want to say, so a lot of people have been putting stuff in the chat with links to all kinds of resources. So want to check those out.
Right, and we can share the chat with everybody after this event. One of the links that I just included in the chat was the link to our next one of our upcoming Learning Lab webinars that's going to focus on project maintenance.
Yeah.
So I'll just put it one more time in there, so you can click on that link and register.
Great, thank you, Anna. Well, I think we'll close out here with those words that we've borrowed from Wendell Berry. Do unto those downstream as you would have those upstream do unto you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care, all.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Farewell. Farewell. Good job.
Yeah, and I think, Kalia, if you just stop the meeting, everybody gets
Here we go.
to leave.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.